Recently, while preparing for the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, I'd noticed something peculiar about Mohgwyn Palace, specifically the top portion of it, where you do battle with Mohg. No matter when you arrive there, it's on fire. The statues and columns are ablaze, embers dance in the air, and from a distance you can see that even the earth upon which it is built is burning as well, giving off an almost molten appearance. All of this calls to mind the change of scenery in the third act of the game, when burning the Erdtree causes the very same embers to descend from the sky and for Round Table Hold to go up in flames. These visual elements are so closely associated with the climax that I'd never noticed this before. Typically, I make a run at the incestuous omen after clearing Farum Azula, and because the world was burning above, the fact that it was also burning below simply didn't stand out to me. But even if you go there before you piss off Smokey Bear and start the forest fire to end all forest fires, Mohgwyn Palace is still ablaze. So the question is, why? Why is this ruin, far beneath the earth, burning in a manner that is so reminiscent to the most dramatic moment of Elden Ring? What does this tell us about the origins of Mohgwyn Palace? What does it tell us about the people who lived there? And what might it tell us about the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC? Today, we're going to try and figure all of that out. But before I go on, if you are an Elden Ring fan, then please be sure to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me with a YouTube channel membership or over on Patreon. My dream is to make these videos full-time someday, and by doing any of those things, you'll be helping make that dream a reality. First, let's make it perfectly clear that the embers around Mohgwyn Palace and those descending from the burning Erdtree are indeed the same. Comparing them, there's no doubt that they're identical. The color and shape match. The only difference between the two is the way they behave in the air. As mentioned, the embers from the burning Erdtree descend like fallen leaves. The embers in Mohgwyn Palace, however, appear to be aimlessly drifting in all sorts of directions. It's pretty strange, and seems to suggest that these embers were not produced by anything that happened recently, but instead are ashen remnants that have been kicked about by the wind and the activity of its current occupants. While we're on the topic, speaking of the current occupants, I think we can rule out Mohg as the source of the embers as well. As you can see from his arrival cutscene, they're already there when he gets his creep on with Miquella's hand. And though he uses blood flame throughout his fight with us, it appears, at least to me, to be a slightly different color, a bit more orange than the fire that's perpetually burning the columns. And it still doesn't explain why the flames persist the way they do, and why the whole damn landmass looks like it's hiding Ragnaros from World of Warcraft inside of it. Now, how far do these embers go? Well, if you explore Mohgwyn Palace grounds in its entirety, you'll see that these embers are confined to just the upper section. You really only notice them once you've reached the Dynasty Mausoleum midpoint site of grace. There aren't any embers at the entrance where the Pureblood Medallion drops you off, and there aren't any embers at the Palace Approach Ledge, better known as the Albinora Killing Field, though you will get a great view of the burning rock formations that make up the base of the structure. And just to reiterate, this is a phenomenon that is indeed exclusive to this part of the underground area. There are no embers in Nokron, nor the Nameless Eternal City. Noxtella's false sky seems to have pieces falling down from it, but still, they definitely aren't on fire. So what the hell happened here? Why is Mohgwyn Palace on fire? As I see it, there is only one logical explanation. Mohgwyn Palace and the surrounding region were banished underground shortly after the burning of a previous great tree. Either the first burning of the Erdtree, as has been theorized by many and popularized by Tarnished Archaeologist, or the burning of the Shadow Tree, which might have followed Messmer's attack on the city shown in the story trailer, reducing it to the charred husk we see in other scenes. This would both explain the behavior of the ashes in the air and why they're only found at the upper sections of the palace. At one point, all of Mohgwyn Palace was likely covered in ash, just like Lanedell at the end of the game. Over time, the ash was kicked up into the air, but can still be found in the regions with the highest elevation, because those sections would have been covered with more ash than those below it. So, if that's why it's on fire, then why is it underground? Well, we know that Nokron and Noxtella were banished beneath the earth as punishment for drawing the ire of the Greater Will. Specifically, their crime seems to have been the creation of the Fingerslayer blade, the weapon that Ranni uses to kill her two fingers during her questline. The reason for the exile of the Nameless Eternal City remains a mystery, but Tarnished Archaeologist has a great theory, which I'll link below, in which he argues that the Nameless Eternal City was once part of Lanedell, and that it was banished for a different reason than Nokron and Noxtella. This is evidenced, he argues, based on the fact that the Nameless Eternal City does not have the false night sky seen in the other two locations, and that the Nameless Eternal City must have been above ground at the beginning of the Shattering, as shown in this shot from the story trailer, where the forces of Godfrey the Grafted are attacking the front entrance to the capital, right where the Nameless City would have been. Ultimately, he gestures towards the idea that it might have been the murder of Godwyn that earned its exile. Some have speculated that Godwyn was next in line to be Elden Lord, the consort of either Ranni, Miquella, or Malenia, so there's no doubt this would have pissed off the Greater Will. All of this is to say that all three Eternal Cities were banished underground for, in one way or another, angering the big GW. Now, back to Mohgwyn. I can understand some folks wanting to lump it in with Nokron, but that just doesn't make sense. Its landmass is too distant, too separate from the resting place of the Fingerslayer blade. And according to the Mohgwyn Palace grounds map item description, in the lightless depths lies the grave of an ancient civilization. In other words, this area is more ancient than even the Eternal Cities, the last will and testament of a civilization that ruled over the lands between ages ago. Thus, it can't have been a part of Nokron. It must have been sent underground far earlier, and only shares in its night sky due to its proximity to the aforementioned bastion of the Nox. Circling back to my earlier speculation, based on this timeline, we can rule out the first burning of the Erdtree as the source of the embers. Smoughtown speculates that the first burning of the Erdtree might have taken place during the Godskin uprising, which appears to be a fairly recent event on Elden Ring's lengthy timeline. And I'm inclined to agree, though it wouldn't shock me if the expansion completely upends our understanding of the history of the lands between. For now, however, I do think we can rule it out regardless, given the advanced age of these ruins, meaning that the only remaining possibility is that these embers must come from the burning of the Shadow Tree. So let's piece together what we've discovered so far. We've got Erdtree embers in ruins that were banished underground by the Greater Will shortly after the burning of the Shadow Tree. But why were they punished this way in the first place? Well, we know that in order to become a vessel for the Elden Ring, one must become a god, and that to become a god, one must first be named an Empyrean by the two fingers. As described by Ranni, her, Miquella, and Malenia were all Empyreans. So it stands to reason that at some point in the distant past, Marika was named an Empyrean by her own two fingers, and probably had to compete with rivals to become the god of the new age. In some ways, it seems that this is the natural cycle of the lands between. Empyreans are chosen by the two fingers. One of them rises to power as a god, and enjoys the support of their powerful Elden Lord. But eventually, the Greater Will decides it's time for a change, and calls on the two fingers to select new Empyreans and start the process all over again. It's kind of like the NFL draft, just with a lot less fanfare, a lot more death, and instead of getting a hug from the commissioner, you get a super special tree from the order-obsessed entity in the sky. So, if this is the natural cycle of things, then perhaps the original denizens of Mohgwyn Palace, whatever they called it back then, were banished underground for trying to arrest this process, based on the fact that the Greater Will imprisons Marika for shattering the Elden Ring and potentially screwing up this process, and the Nox for the creation of the Fingerslayer blade, which can enable Ranni to bring forth the Age of the Stars. It stands to reason that only attempting to halt this all-important cosmic cycle would be infuriating enough to the Greater Will to impose such a dramatic punishment. But still, there is a bigger question here. How did the original denizens of Mohgwyn Palace attempt to arrest this process? How did they try and gum up the works of the order-churning machine that is the Greater Will? I think that the answer has actually been staring us in the face for quite some time. So I hope you'll join me next time as I present a theory that will tie together the conclusions proposed by so many of the community's best creators. My theory that the Elden Ring has been shattered more than once. Thanks for watching. Huge thanks to Alex Roe, who allows all of us Soulsborne YouTubers to use his amazing remixes for our videos. To check out all of his music, just follow the link down below in the description box. Big shout out to my Silver and Gold tier Patreon subscribers and YouTube channel members, including James Pruitt, Raven Lampkin, Corey Matson, Gustavo Balabi, Lil Caesar, Reed, and Pathonian, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 to $10 a month. See you guys on Friday for my next Witcher video.